So the project started about 3 years ago. And Dominic will help me such that the video works better. Can you go to the next, please? Okay. The context of this essence is an online portal for e-learning and supporting social inclusion of people with dyslexia. So it was a nice play with letters, but a very definite, clear message putting the literacy. I liked that when I first heard about the project. And it has a project homepage with the description of all the partners and what the project is about, and the second, the portal homepage that is mainly for dyslexic users but also for others to actually learn and socially include themselves. Thinking what would be some crystallizing ideas, I came up with 5 issues. First is both e-learning and social inclusion for the dyslexic users, and also research. There was quite some conversation, discussion, dialogue on these issues. What would be more important? Should they train? Should they do exercises? Or should they be motivated? Should they get help to connect? Should they get ideas, materials to read through, forums to connect? So what would be more important? Their training and learning, or their social inclusion, also by various assistive or helpful tools? So the web is a broad space. I think we got quite some balance in both these points, and as we see from the validation studies, some people prefer more the assessment and the trainings, others prefer more the life stories, tools like the magnifier. So they are also different, and there is no one size fits all, so we included both those perspectives that are important. And we should not forget the research component. I will tell a bit more on that, and in particular later, Professor Renate will talk more on this. Okay, the next is an online portal with users with dyslexia for age 60 plus. There will be also more on it, with 7 partners, with both self-organized activities on the portal as well as guided activities, as some dyslexic users might prefer some guidance. And what was most our contribution in Vienna is a human-centered or user-centered approach that allowed us to include the dyslexic persons from the beginning till the end and really work with them. And that was a particularly rich learning for us. Next, please. Okay, so I already showed there were objectives to improve through exercises and knowledge, met through learning materials and testings, skills, exercises, and objective to facilitate social inclusion by ways of connecting through Facebook, through the portal, through doing some creative activities, since many dyslexic users are gifted in the creative, in the arts. We provide assistive tools, for example, a magnifier or reading of the text, such that people who really study hard can also have this help from the portal. We have some life stories that should motivate people not to give up, but really try, as others have tried, and some motivation on really do it, because some of them really have a career and did it, like one of my colleagues who just arrived. And very important, I think, is the raising of awareness. In particular, also we so far don't have a German portal, but talking about that and being able to show a product raises awareness by various stakeholders, and we want to continue with that. Okay, this is also a research project. I've always understood that in a way, but this perspective has been strengthened in particular in the end, and now in particular during the last week, as I could comment on a scientific paper put together by AnimaScan, Samuel Kelzmann, that really makes clear how an online assessment or test battery really can reach people from various languages, such that dyslexia on those languages can be researched. So far I heard there's lots of studies in some languages, in particular in English, but not so much internationally, and there are fascinating aspects as to speed of reading, as to the nature of the language, that give really very new results. So the research perspective is, I think, also something strong and something that should definitely be continued even after this one project ends. At the University of Vienna, we were very fascinated by adapting the human-centered design process, that is a software engineering technique, in particular for users with special needs. We saw that we needed to adapt, for example, standardized instrument and tests to make them usable for users with dyslexia. We needed to adapt testings to make the language very simple, short sentences and so on, but it works, and this is in particular Dominic's work, and we also continue on that to have a more general and specialized version of the human-centered design for users with specific needs. So also a contribution to the technology or to the engineering perspective in the research dimension. Next, please. So we kept the portal structure very simple, and as you see, the left-hand column, maybe it is not the most modern design of websites, but this was the research and the wish of the dyslexic users. So by far the vast majority wanted some really simple navigation structure. And here you see it offers about dyslexia and everyday life, some e-learning and awareness-raising things. It offers you to test yourself, to screen whether you could have dyslexia or not. Then it offers brain training, helpful tools, and a community zone and a creative corner mainly to connect. Okay, so there exist various resources for children and very young. So this portal's major audience are people from 16 onwards. We started at 14, but there were some legal issues such that it was more safe to propagate, for example, self-assessment for young people up from the age of 16. Then we learned that we could not reach all people, because that would be too versatile and too many efforts going on in too many directions. So after some discussion we said we want in particular to reach those who have at least a minimal digital literacy, such that, for example, they could open a browser and work with it. And a specific challenge is to have offerings for older and younger age, like, for example, for older age, helpful tools like the magnifier, and for the younger ones, access to Facebook and to some creative tools, for example. There were, in my view, two initiators of the project. On the one hand, Sonja Martin-Rollers from Indra. So interestingly, both were companies, industrial companies, and the second one, Renate from BMI in Brno. And interestingly, the seeds of that project came from industrial companies who then looked for also academic partners and brought us together, the, I would say, large family in my view, because we were really very open in our conversation. There was lots of transparency with all the advantages, but sometimes also more of conflicts that's going on if you really are open and if you really are devoted, and everybody, I'm sure, wanted their best for their portal and their ideas. So there was lots of intensive discussions and communication going on by email and in our meetings. I haven't counted the number of mails, but they were really many.
Too many to count.
Too many to count, yeah. So, and personally I would like to say that this was a particularly rich dimension of that project. All this diversity and the learning through the communication. So there was lots, in addition to the scientific and to the engineering and to the psychological aspects, there was lots of social interaction among those European partners that I personally value very, very highly. And it's a lot of work, but I would never want to quit the project. So I'm really happy if I could be part of it, and thank Bratislav, who basically included me through links through Vienna, such that Renate became a partner. Okay, thank you. The next, please. Yeah, so the portal works in two different modes. The one is a self-organized mode where users can just access it and do whatever they feel they want to, whatever they like, and explore very freely. However, dyslexic users often like some guidance, so the portal offers them the opportunity to make a self-assessment, and based on that, they get hints on what certain things would be most useful for them to do. And we also talked and thought about a lot how to present the results of the testings, for example. And we did not want the users to be demotivated, that they are a lot worse than the average of the population in many of the reading dimensions and learning dimensions. So the idea was to display their relative strengths and weaknesses. So they would learn in comparison to themselves what are their strong and what are their weak sides. So I think also this is a particular creative thought and a contribution to a humanistic view on how technology can really help people, support them, emphasize kind of their strengths and help them to work on their weaknesses. Okay, next please. Yeah, and here we are already with the human-centered design that works always iteratively, and the essential thing I would say is in all phases the inclusion of the end users, in this way the dyslexic people. I think I learned a lot from them, and it was this human energy that came into the portal when we as experts had designed something, checked with them, and they had partially new ideas, other ways to look at the design. So it was partly also a challenge to keep to what they needed, what they wanted. And this challenge is still going on because we are almost done with the validation study, but still will need to include the results from the final testing of the dyslexic users into the final version of the portal. And I hope we can do it, and their evaluation is not 180 degrees different from what we designed. But since we included them from the very beginning, I trust there will not be major changes, and again it is very motivating that the major reactions, I think I can say that from all three countries, are primarily positive. Okay, thank you. So we got a lot of immersion or a kind of conscientization with the dyslexic users by listening to them, going to schools. This one was organized by Eva Giarmati. I enjoyed it to be able to talk to a class of people with some learning difficulties. Yeah, one slide that might expose some of the basic philosophy that we brought to the project. We tried and I think lived upon the principle to consider dyslexia as a special way of thinking. Not the norm, different to the norm, but still a special way rather than a disability. So the part that explains about dyslexia, what dyslexia is about, is that it is not only about literacy, but a special way of functioning of memory, speed of processing, time perception, organizing and sequencing and so on. So you will find more of these texts that are written in a, I think, respectful way towards the end users who have these difficulties. So we tried hard to do that properly, as also one of the essential aspects of the project. Okay. So, at the end is always a beginning. Now the challenge is to maintain the portal, but not only to maintain, but only maintaining would mean that by and large it becomes obsolete and not innovative enough, but also to extend it and to expand. My wish would be to really bring it to users worldwide. The web makes it possible. Our conference attendances also make it possible. That would need to transport it to further languages. And I appreciate to have one student who just last week shared his interest while he was working on the usability of literacy last year in a class of mine, that perhaps you could bring it into Arabic. Yes? Okay. In Austria, there are plans to translate the portal, and we have a very, very tiny project for Dominic already to translate parts. So we hope if we can get a German version, and in particular if we can get the ministry to support also the maintenance, we could be a lot more effective in raising awareness in schools and in teacher education. Interestingly, about 3 years ago, more or less by chance, I talked to some teachers and they didn't know at all about dyslexia or how to deal with someone who has Legasthenie, we often say in German. So I was shocked a little that this knowledge is not passed on to teacher candidates, and I think that something like the portal could be a very helpful resource to pass that on in our teacher education courses, and also for teachers to use it at school to learn about the condition and to know how to deal with students who have this condition. Yeah, we will hear more about the research facilities, in particular based on the online assessment. So, my mission is to start today to continue and facilitate the social inclusion of and learning of people and peers who are special in some way. Hope we have prepared and done a lot of work, and this will not end but expand and extend in the future. Thank you for your attention.